Episode 93. She bent and peered under the bed. She opened Hagrid's cupboards. She passed within 2 inches of where Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood pressed against the wall. Harry actually pulled in his stomach as she walked by. After looking carefully inside the enormous cauldron Hagrid used for cooking, she wheeled around again and said,
"What has happened to you? How did you sustain those injuries?"
Hagrid hastily removed the dragon stake from his face, which in Harry's opinion was a mistake, because the black and purple bruising all around his eye was now clearly visible, not to mention the large amount of fresh and congealed blood on his face.
"Oh, I had a bit of an accident," he said lamely. "What sort of accident?" I tripped." "You tripped?" she repeated coolly. "Yeah, that's right. Over a friend's broomstick. I don't fly myself. Well, look at the size of me. I don't reckon there's a broomstick that'd hold me. Friend of mine breeds Abraxan horses. I don't know if you ever seen them. Big beasts, winged, you know. I've had a bit of a ride on one of them, and it was—" "Where have you been?"
asked Umbridge, cutting coolly through Hagrid's babbling.
"Where have I been?" "Yes," she said. "Term started more than 2 months ago. Another teacher has had to cover your classes. None of your colleagues has been able to give me any information as to your whereabouts. You left no address. Where have you been?"
There was a pause in which Hagrid stared at her with his newly uncovered eye. Harry could almost hear his brain working furiously.
I've been away from my health," he said. "For your health," said Umbridge.
Her eyes traveled over Hagrid's discolored and swollen face. Dragon blood dripped gently into his waistcoat in the silence.
"I see. Yeah," said Hagrid. "Bit of fresh air, you know." "Yes, as gamekeeper, fresh air must be so difficult to come by," said Umbridge sweetly.
The small patch of Hagrid's face that was not black or purple flushed.
"Well, change of scene, you know." "Mountain scenery?" said Umbridge swiftly.
She knows, thought Harry desperately.
"Mountains?" Hagrid repeated, clearly thinking fast. "No, south of France for me. Bit of sun and sea." "Really?" said Umbridge. "You don't have much of a tan." "Yeah, well, sensitive skin," said Hagrid, attempting an ingratiating smile. Harry noticed that 2 of his teeth had been knocked out. Umbridge looked at him coldly, and his smile faltered. Then she hoisted her handbag a little higher in the crook of her arm and said, "I shall, of course, be informing the minister of your late return."
"Right," said Hagrid, nodding.
"You ought to know, too, that as High Inquisitor, it is my unfortunate but necessary duty to inspect my fellow teachers. So I dare say we shall meet again soon enough." She turned sharply and marched back to the door. "You're inspecting us?" Hagrid echoed blankly, looking after her. "Oh, yes," said Umbridge softly, looking back at him with her hand on the door handle. "The ministry is determined to weed out unsatisfactory teachers, Hagrid. Good night." She left, closing the door behind her with a snap. Harry made to pull off the invisibility cloak, but Hermione seized his wrist. "Not yet," she breathed in his ear. "She might not be gone yet." Hagrid seemed to be thinking the same way. He stumped across the room and pulled back the curtain an inch or so. "She's gone back to the castle," he said in a low voice. "Blimey, inspecting people, is she?" "Yeah," said Harry, pulling the cloak off. "Trelawney's on probation already." What sort of thing are you planning to do with us in class, Hagrid?" asked Hermione. "Don't you worry about that. I got a great load of lessons planned,"
said Hagrid enthusiastically, scooping up his dragon steak from the table and slapping it over his eye again.
"I've been keeping a couple of creatures saved for your owl year. You wait. There's something really special."
Special in what way?"
asked Hermione tentatively.
"I'm not saying," said Hagrid happily. "I don't want to spoil the surprise."
"Look, Hagrid,"
said Hermione urgently, dropping all pretense.
"Professor Umbridge won't be at all happy if you bring anything to class that's too dangerous."
"Dangerous?"
said Hagrid, looking genially bemused.
"Don't be silly. I wouldn't give you anything dangerous. I mean, all right, they can look after themselves."
"Hagrid, you've got to pass Umbridge's inspection, and to do that it would really be better if she saw you teaching us how to look after Porlocks, how to tell the difference between gnarls and hedgehogs, stuff like that,"
said Hermione earnestly.
"Well, that's not very interesting, Hermione," said Hagrid. "The stuff I've got's much more impressive. I've been bringing them on for years. I reckon I got the only domestic herd in Britain."
"Hagrid, please,"
said Hermione, a note of real desperation in her voice.
"Umbridge is looking for any excuse to get rid of teachers she thinks are too close to Dumbledore. Please, Hagrid, teach us something dull that's bound to come up in our owl."
But Hagrid merely yawned widely and cast a one-eyed look of longing toward the vast bed in the corner.
"Listen, it's been a long day and it's late,"
he said, patting Hermione gently on the shoulder, so that her knees gave way and hit the floor with a thud.
"Oh, sorry."
He pulled her back up by the neck of her robes.
"Look, don't you go worrying about me. I promise you I've really good stuff planned for your lessons now I'm back. Now you lot had better get back up to the castle, and don't forget to wipe your footprints out behind you."
"I don't know if you got through to him," said Ron a short while later, when, having checked that the coast was clear, they walked back up to the castle through the thickening snow, leaving no trace behind them due to the obliteration charm Hermione was performing as they went.
"Then I'll go back again tomorrow,"
said Hermione determinedly.
"I'll plan his lessons for him if I have to. I don't care if she throws out Trelawney, but she's not taking Hagrid."
Chapter 21 The Eye of the Snake. Hermione plowed her way back to Hagrid's cabin through 2 feet of snow on Sunday morning. Harry and Ron wanted to go with her, but their mountain of homework had reached an alarming height again, so they grudgingly remained in the common room, trying to ignore the gleeful shouts drifting up from the grounds outside, where students were enjoying themselves skating on the frozen lake, tobogganing, and worst of all, bewitching snowballs to zoom up to Gryffindor Tower and rap hard on the windows. "Oi!" bellowed Ron, finally losing patience and sticking his head out of the window. "I am a prefect, and if one more snowball hits this window, ouch!" He withdrew his head sharply, his face covered in snow. "His friend George," he said bitterly, slamming the window behind him. "Gits." Hermione returned from Hagrid's just before lunch, shivering slightly, her robes damp to the knees. "So," said Ron, looking up when she entered, "got all his lessons planned for him?"
"Well, I tried,"
she said dully, sinking into a chair beside Harry. She pulled out her wand and gave it a complicated little wave so that hot air streamed out of the tip. She then pointed this at her robes, which began to steam as they dried out.
"He wasn't even there when I arrived. I was knocking for at least half an hour, and then he came stumping out of the forest."
Harry groaned. The Forbidden Forest was teeming with the kind of creatures most likely to get Hagrid the sack. "What's he keeping in there, did he say?" asked Harry.
"No," said Hermione miserably. "He says he wants them to be a surprise. I tried to explain about Umbridge, but he just doesn't get it."